Hey there, you looking kinda cute. Don't forget to subscribe and check out my other socials for more. Enjoy. The house stood silent, bathed in the warm glow of afternoon sunlight. Jace's heart raced with anticipation as he peered out the window one last time, watching Savannah's car disappear around the corner. He took a deep breath, savoring the rare moment of solitude. With careful steps, he made his way to their shared bedroom. The door creaked softly as he pushed it open, revealing a space that held both comfort and temptation. His gaze immediately fell on Savannah's wardrobe, its wooden doors slightly ajar, beckoning him closer. Jace's fingers trembled as he reached out, gently pulling the wardrobe open wider. A kaleidoscope of colors and fabrics greeted him, each item holding the promise of transformation. After a moment of deliberation, he selected a flowing silk blouse in a deep emerald green. The cool fabric slipped through his fingers as he lifted it from its hanger. Next, he chose a black pencil skirt that hugged Savannah's curves so beautifully. He imagined how it might feel on his own body. With his treasures in hand, Jace retreated to the ensuite bathroom. He carefully removed his own clothes, folding them neatly and setting them aside. The silk blouse whispered against his skin as he slipped it on, the material cool and smooth. The skirt proved more challenging. Jace sucked in his breath as he shimmied it over his hips, the fabric stretching to accommodate his different frame. When he finally managed to zip it up, he turned to face the mirror. The reflection that greeted him was both familiar and foreign. The emerald green of the blouse brought out flecks of color in his eyes he'd never noticed before. The skirt, while snug, accentuated his waist in a way his usual clothes never did. A smile tugged at the corners of his mouth. Emboldened by his reflection, Jace turned his attention to Savannah's makeup collection. He'd watched her apply it countless times, but facing the array of products now, he felt overwhelmed. With hesitant hands, he selected a tube of mascara, remembering how it made Savannah's eyes pop. The application was far from graceful. Jace poked himself in the eye twice before managing to coat his lashes, the result clumpy and uneven. Undeterred, he moved on to lipstick, choosing a bold red that always turned heads when Savannah wore it. He pursed his lips, attempting to mimic Savannah's technique. The result was a wobbly line that extended beyond his natural lip shape. Jace chuckled at his reflection, feeling a mix of amusement and disappointment at his lack of skill. Despite the imperfections, Jace felt a thrill of excitement as he took in his transformed appearance. The person staring back at him from the mirror was someone new, someone daring and free. He straightened his posture, feeling a confidence he rarely experienced in his day-to-day life. With tentative steps, Jace left the bathroom and ventured into the hallway. The skirt restricted his movement, forcing him to take smaller strides. He focused on the click of his bare feet against the hardwood floor, imagining the sound of high heels. In the living room, Jace twirled slowly, watching the skirt flare out slightly. He made his way to the kitchen, opening the refrigerator more for the experience than out of hunger. The cool air raised goosebumps on his arms, making him shiver. Jace imagined preparing dinner like this, the domestic scene taking on a new dimension in his current attire. As he closed the refrigerator door, a car engine rumbled in the distance. Jace froze, his heart suddenly pounding. He glanced at the clock on the microwave, confusion and panic warring in his mind. Savannah wasn't supposed to be home for hours. The sound grew louder, unmistakably approaching their house. Jace's mind raced, calculating the fastest route back to the bedroom. He hurried down the hallway, the skirt hampering his movements. Just as he reached the bedroom door, he heard a key turning in the front lock. Panic seized him. There was no time to change, no time to return Savannah's clothes to their proper place. Jace darted into the bathroom, his eyes wild as he searched for a solution. The makeup remover caught his eye, and he grabbed it, frantically scrubbing at his face with a washcloth. Red lipstick smeared across his cheek, and mascara left dark streaks under his eyes. "Jace?" Savannah's voice called from the living room. "Are you home?" His hands shook as he looked for a place to hide the clothes. The laundry basket sat in the corner, half full of dirty clothes. Without a second thought, Jace stripped off the blouse and skirt, shoving them deep into the basket and covering them with other items. "Yeah, I'm here," he called back, his voice cracking slightly. Just finishing up in the bathroom." Jace turned back to the mirror, horrified at the mess of makeup on his face. He scrubbed harder, his skin turning red from the friction. The sound of Savannah's footsteps grew closer. "Everything okay in there?" she asked, her voice just outside the bathroom door. "Fine," Jace squeaked, frantically searching for his own clothes. With dawning horror, he realized he'd left them folded neatly on the counter, right next to Savannah's open makeup bag. The doorknob turned. Jace lunged for a towel, wrapping it around his waist just as Savannah stepped into the bathroom. Her eyes widened as she took in the scene before her. Jace stood frozen, water dripping down his chest, streaks of makeup still visible on his face. Savannah's gaze moved from him to the counter, where his clothes sat next to her sprawled makeup collection. "Jace?" she said slowly, confusion evident in her voice. "What's going on?" He opened his mouth, but no words came out. How could he explain this? His mind raced, searching for an excuse, any explanation that might make sense. But as the silence stretched between them, he knew there was no way to hide the truth. I was just... he began, his voice barely above a whisper. Savannah's expression softened as she took in his obvious distress. She stepped closer, reaching out to touch his arm gently. "Hey, it's okay. Whatever it is, you can tell me." Jace took a deep breath, steeling himself. "I was trying on your clothes," he admitted, his eyes fixed on the floor. "And your makeup. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have." "Oh, Jace!" Savannah interrupted, her voice filled with understanding. "Is this something you've wanted to do for a while?" He nodded, still unable to meet her gaze. "I didn't know how to tell you. I was afraid you'd think I was weird or..." Savannah's hand moved to his chin, gently tilting his face up to look at her. "I don't think you're weird at all. I'm just surprised, that's all. Why didn't you tell me sooner?" The acceptance in her eyes broke something open in Jace. Words began to pour out of him, explaining how he'd always been curious, how putting on her clothes made him feel alive in a way he'd never experienced before. Savannah listened attentively, nodding and squeezing his hand encouragingly. When he finally fell silent, Savannah smiled. "Thank you for sharing this with me. I'm glad you feel comfortable enough, to be honest." "You're not upset?" Jace asked, hardly daring to believe it. Savannah shook her head. "Not at all, though I am a little concerned about the state of my makeup," she added with a chuckle, gesturing to the smears on his face. Jace laughed, the tension finally breaking. "Yeah, I'm not very good at applying it, or removing it, apparently." "Well, that's something we can work on," Savannah said, reaching for a fresh washcloth. She wet it with warm water and began gently cleaning his face. "If this is something you want to explore more, I'd be happy to help." As she worked, Jace felt a wave of emotion wash over him. The fear and shame he'd carried for so long began to dissipate, replaced by a profound sense of relief and gratitude. "There," Savannah said, stepping back to admire her work. "Much better, though next time let's start with a good primer, okay?" Jace laughed, pulling her into a tight hug. "Thank you," he whispered into her hair. "For understanding, for accepting me." Savannah hugged him back just as fiercely. "Always," she promised. "Now, why don't you get dressed? And we can talk more about this. Maybe we can even plan a little shopping trip for you." As Savannah left the bathroom, giving him privacy to change, Jace caught sight of himself in the mirror. The makeup was gone, but he saw himself differently now. He saw someone braver, more honest, more complete. And for the first time in a long while, he felt truly at peace with who he was. The days that followed were a whirlwind of conversations and revelations. Jace and Savannah spent long evenings talking, with Jace opening up about his desires and insecurities. Savannah listened with patience and understanding, asking questions and offering support. One evening, as they sat curled up on the couch, Savannah broached the subject of shopping. "I was thinking," she said, running her fingers through Jace's hair. "Maybe we could go to the mall this weekend. Pick out some things just for you." Jace tensed slightly. "I don't know," he said, his voice uncertain. "What if someone sees us?" Savannah squeezed his hand reassuringly. "We could drive to the next town over if you're worried. Or we could shop online to start with. Whatever makes you comfortable." The idea of having his own clothes chosen specifically for this part of himself filled Jace with both excitement and trepidation. Maybe online would be good to start," he said slowly. "But I think I'd like to go to a store eventually, to try things on properly." Savannah beamed at him. "That sounds perfect. We'll take it one step at a time." That night, they huddled around Savannah's laptop, scrolling through online boutiques. Jace marveled at the variety of styles available, feeling overwhelmed but exhilarated by the possibilities. "What about this?" Savannah asked, pointing to a burgundy wrap dress. "It would look amazing with your skin tone." Jace studied the image, trying to imagine himself wearing it. "It's beautiful," he admitted. "But maybe something a little less dramatic for my first piece." They continued browsing, with Savannah offering suggestions and Jace gradually becoming more confident in expressing his preferences. By the end of the evening, they had placed an order for a simple black skirt, a flowy blouse in a soft blue, and a pair of low heels. As they waited for the package to arrive, Jace found himself both nervous and excited. He caught himself daydreaming at work, imagining how the clothes would feel, how he'd look wearing them. The anticipation was almost unbearable. Finally, on a sunny Tuesday afternoon, Jace came home to find a nondescript brown box waiting on the porch. His heart raced as he carried it inside, setting it on the kitchen counter and staring at it as if it might disappear. That's how Savannah found him when she returned from work an hour later. "Is that what I think it is?" she asked, a smile playing on her lips. Jace nodded, still not touching the box. "I was waiting for you," he explained. "I wanted us to open it together." Savannah's expression softened. She came to stand beside him, wrapping an arm around his waist. "Shall we do the honors, then?" With trembling fingers, Jace opened the box. The tissue paper crinkled as he unwrapped each item, revealing the clothes they had chosen together. The fabric felt even softer than he had imagined. "They're perfect," he breathed, running his hand over the skirt's smooth material. Savannah picked up the blouse, holding it up to Jace's chest. "It matches your eyes beautifully," she said. "Do you want to try them on?" Jace hesitated for a moment, then nodded. He gathered the clothes in his arms and headed to the bedroom, Savannah following close behind. As he changed, she sat on the edge of the bed, offering words of encouragement. When Jace emerged from the bathroom, Savannah's breath caught. "You look stunning," Savannah said, her voice filled with genuine admiration. Jace turned to look in the full-length mirror, and for a moment he hardly recognized himself. The person staring back at him wasn't just Jace playing dress-up in Savannah's clothes. This was a part of himself he'd kept hidden for so long, now finally seeing the light of day. Tears welled up in his eyes. "I never thought I could feel like this," he whispered. Savannah came to stand behind him, wrapping her arms around his waist and resting her chin on his shoulder. "This is you," she said softly. "All of you. And you are beautiful." In that moment, looking at their reflection in the mirror, Jace felt a sense of wholeness he'd never experienced before. The shame and fear that had haunted him for so long began to fade, replaced by acceptance and love, both from Savannah and, perhaps more importantly, from himself. As the weeks passed, Jace grew more comfortable exploring this aspect of himself. With Savannah's encouragement, he began to experiment with different styles and looks. Some days he preferred more masculine attire, while on others he embraced his feminine side fully. Savannah proved to be an invaluable ally in his journey. She helped him refine his makeup skills, showing him techniques for contouring and blending that transformed his appearance. They spent evenings practicing together, laughing over smudged eyeliner and clumpy mascara until Jace's hand grew steady and confident. One Saturday morning, as they sat enjoying a lazy breakfast, Savannah broached a subject they hadn't yet discussed. "I was thinking," she said, stirring her coffee thoughtfully. "Would you maybe want to go out sometime? Dressed up, I mean." Jace nearly choked on his toast. The idea of venturing outside the safety of their home in his feminine attire both thrilled and terrified him. "I don't know," he said hesitantly. "What if someone recognizes me?" Savannah reached across the table to squeeze his hand. "We could start small," she suggested. "Maybe just a quick trip to the corner store or a walk in the park after dark. Something low-key to build your confidence." Jace considered the idea. The thought of feeling the sun on his face, the wind in his hair, while fully embracing this part of himself was undeniably appealing. "Maybe," he said slowly. "But not yet. I need some time to work up to that." "Of course," Savannah agreed readily. "There's no rush. We'll do it when you're ready if you decide you want to at all." As spring turned to summer, Jace found himself longing for that experience more and more. He'd grown comfortable moving around the house in various outfits, but the world beyond their front door called to him. Finally, on a warm evening in late June, Jace made his decision.
"I think I'm ready,"
he told Savannah as they cleaned up after dinner. "To go outside, I mean, if you're still willing to come with me." Savannah's face lit up with a bright smile. "Of course I am," she said, pulling him into a hug. "I'm so proud of you, Jace. This is a big step." They spent the next hour getting ready. Jace chose a simple sundress in a soft yellow, pairing it with comfortable sandals. Savannah helped him apply light, natural-looking makeup, accentuating his features without being overly dramatic. As they stood at the front door, Jace felt his nerves return full force. His hand trembled as he reached for the doorknob. Savannah laced her fingers through his. "We don't have to do this if you're not ready," she reminded him gently. "There's no shame in waiting." Jace took a deep breath, squeezing her hand. "No," he said, his voice growing stronger. "I want to do this. I need to do this." With that, he opened the door and stepped out into the warm evening air. The setting sun painted the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink, a beautiful backdrop for this momentous occasion. They walked slowly down the street, Jace hyper-aware of every sound and movement around them. A car passed by, and he tensed, but the driver didn't even glance their way. A neighbor watering her garden waved cheerfully, calling out a greeting to Savannah. As they reached the small park at the end of their street, Jace began to relax. The familiar surroundings took on a new quality, seen through the lens of this experience. The rustle of leaves in the breeze, the distant laughter of children playing, the scent of blooming flowers. Everything felt more vibrant, more alive. They found a quiet bench overlooking a small pond. As they sat down, Savannah turned to Jace. "How are you feeling?" she asked softly. Jace took a moment to consider the question. "Scared," he admitted, "but also free. Like I can finally breathe properly." He looked down at himself, at the way the dress draped over his legs, at his painted toenails peeking out from his sandals. "I feel like me. All of me." Savannah leaned her head on his shoulder, her arm wrapping around his waist. "You are you," she said, "and you're perfect just as you are." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in deeper hues. A cool breeze rustled the leaves, and Jace shivered slightly, goosebumps rising on his bare arms. "Ready to head back?" Savannah asked, noticing his reaction. Jace nodded, standing up and smoothing down his dress. The walk home felt different, lighter somehow. He stood taller, his steps more confident. The fear that had gripped him earlier had faded, replaced by a sense of accomplishment and pride. As they reached their front door, Jace paused, turning to Savannah. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "For everything. For accepting me. For supporting me. For loving all of me." Savannah cupped his face in her hands, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "Always," she whispered, leaning in to kiss him softly. They stepped back into their home, closing the door on the outside world. But for Jace, it felt less like a retreat and more like a promise. A promise of more adventures to come, more opportunities to be his true self, both within these walls and beyond them. As he got ready for bed that night, removing the makeup and changing into his usual sleepwear, Jace caught sight of himself in the mirror. The man looking back at him was the same person he'd always been, but somehow fundamentally changed. He saw strength where there had once been fear, confidence where there had been shame. Savannah came up behind him, wrapping her arms around his waist and resting her chin on his shoulder, just as she had done that first day when he tried on his new clothes. "What are you thinking?" she asked softly. Jace smiled, meeting her eyes in the reflection. "I'm thinking about how lucky I am," he said, "to have found myself and to have you by my side through it all." Savannah kissed his cheek. "We're both lucky," she said. "Now come to bed. We've had quite the adventure today." As they settled into bed, Jace felt a deep sense of peace wash over him. He knew there would be challenges ahead, explaining to friends and family, navigating the complexities of society's expectations. But he also knew he was strong enough to face them. With Savannah's love and his newfound self-acceptance, he felt ready for whatever the future might hold. In the quiet darkness of their bedroom, Jace made a silent promise to himself. He would continue to explore, to grow, to embrace all aspects of who he was. The journey wouldn't always be easy, but it would be authentically, beautifully his. As he drifted off to sleep, Jace's last conscious thought was of gratitude, for the courage to be honest with himself, for the love that supported him, and for the freedom to be wholly, unashamedly himself. In that moment, he knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, he was exactly where he was meant to be. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to check out my other socials if you want more wonderful content, early access, behind the scenes, and more. All links down below.